Hello and happy Monday. For those of you listening, when this first comes out, we have a new moon in Cancer coming up on Wednesday. For those of you who might be listening to this after the fact, it's still going to be very relevant because I'm not talking specifically about the new moon in Cancer. I'm actually talking about lunar living in general. So, working with the phases of the moon just as a more general concept. I just happen to be releasing this for the new moon because I think that's appropriate. I love working with the moon. I think that it's such a great way to build rhythm into our life, rhythms that include rest and action, rhythms that include reflection, intention, as well as more external things like gathering with our people. Gives us lots of time for solitude, for friendships, for family, as well as just making sure that we're living that intentional life that we want to be living. This is also how I came into astrology. I went to a new moon circle back in February of 2020. So if that rings a bell, that's because it was literally 2 weeks before our first big COVID shutdown. And when I went to that circle, I was in a place at that time where my soul had very much been hibernating. I had been divorced just 2 years earlier. Over the course of those 2 years, I also lost my faith, and that's something I've talked about in prior episodes. Not so much my faith as a whole, as a broad term, but my faith in terms of the community and what it was at that time. It's since had a complete rebirth, which has been really cool. But at that time, back in February of 2020, I very much was living with my soul in hibernation after having lived a very soulful and spiritual life for most of my life prior to that. So I was in a position where I was ready for kind of a reawakening and I didn't know what that would look like. But I got this invitation for a new moon circle at a local day spa and I went. I was curious and something inside said go. Now I know that was my intuition. And during that time, we set intentions about really getting to know ourselves. And we learned a little bit about the moon cycles. We also used oracle cards, which was something else that I ended up diving into. But I loved that whole experience. I loved learning about the phases of the moon. I loved learning about the rhythms that they provide. And so when everything shut down in March of 2020, just literally 2 weeks after this, I dove headfirst into learning about the moon cycles, learning about who I am through the lens of astrology, learning about and using oracle cards. That whole like 6 months after that was just a deep dive into new spiritual practices that awakened something incredible in me. And so heading into this next new moon, as I'm recording this, feels so good to think about how much this has impacted my life over the past 5 years and how I've seen it impact others too as I've shared this. We're going to dive in together to lunar living. This is based on a webinar that I've done in the past. There's a full recording, I think, on my YouTube channel. For those of you who are listening who might want to see slides or visuals of this, you can see that on the YouTube channel. It's most true you. But I think even just listening, this is going to be helpful. So, with lunar living, this is something that I think is so cool because, like I said at the beginning, it gives us a cycle with rhythms. So, if you think about looking at a clock face, what would be 12 o'clock on the clock is our new moon. And as we go clockwise around what would be 3 o'clock, we've got the first quarter moon. What would be 6 o'clock is the full moon. So, down at the bottom. And then over to the left, as you continue around, what would be 9 o'clock is our last quarter moon. And I point that out because the moon has always been used similar to the sun as a method of keeping time. So, where the sun has helped us track hours, the moon has helped us track days and seasons and cycles. So, with the new moon at the top, this is, and we're talking in terms of Western astrology. There's nuances with this in Jewish astrology, in Vedic and Eastern astrology, but we're specifically talking about this from the lens of Western astrology today. In Western astrology, the new moon lasts for about 3 days. It's when there's no light in the sky from the moon. And when we begin to see that first sliver of the waxing crescent moon visible, that's when the new moon has ended and we've officially begun heading toward that first quarter moon. So, thinking about this being a time that is dark, in ancient times when we didn't have electricity, street lights, that sort of thing, people were inside. That's where it was safe. They weren't going out at night typically. Travelers were sleeping. Harvest wasn't happening at that time. It was a time to be inside with yourself, with your family unit, with those that you lived with. And so thinking about it from that lens helps us understand why this is an intention setting time. This is a time when we're looking at, okay, in the cycle ahead, what seeds do we want to plant? Because we're not out at night harvesting, but we might be planting seeds during the day if we tie it back to that. Some of the key words that are associated with the new moon are things like transition, a blank slate, a beginning, optimism. It's a very hopeful time because it's filled with potential. There's a lot that can happen in the 28, 29-day cycle ahead. It's a time of renewal. The new moon is a time to set intentions and plant seeds of what we want to see coming in the cycle ahead. For me, I love this because being intentional and living intentionally is something that I had always valued, but I didn't realize how much I valued it until I began working with the moon cycles and saw, oh, this is what I've been trying to do for so long, but I didn't have a way to naturally bring it into my life. So, doing things like vision boards, going on retreats, and thinking about what I wanted for the future, all of that was part of my life prior to knowing about astrology and really working with astrology. But now I have an intentional way of saying, this is part of my rhythm of life to set intentions. So as we go through from the new moon toward the full moon, we say that the moon is waxing. She's gaining light, heading into what we call the first quarter moon, which is really when the moon appears to be halfway full. So the quarter is referring to we're a quarter of the way through the cycle, not what the moon appears to be. The moon appears to be halfway full, but we're one quarter of the way through. I don't math very well, so to me, that's always been a little confusing, but thinking about it in terms of the full cycle is helpful. Keywords that are associated with the first quarter moon are things like action, growth, abundance, building momentum, commitment. This is a time when we look at those intentions that we set, those seeds that we planted a week ago, and we say, are we committed to seeing this through? And what action have we already taken? And what action do we need to take toward that commitment, toward that intention? That's what the energy of the first quarter moon is. So if you're looking at this from the point of view of just going, okay, what is going to be the best use of my energy today? And that you're in somewhere between the new moon and the full moon, that those are times for action. Those are times that you probably have more energy because you're gaining the energy of the light that's reflecting off of the moon. When we get to the full moon, this is the time that's really associated with harvest. So there's if you're looking at the YouTube video, there's other words on here and we'll talk about that, but the full moon is really associated with gathering. So think back to at the new moon, people were inside because there was no light in the sky to help them feel safe, help them feel like they could see what was going on around them. The full moon, people are out. People are harvesting, they're gathering, they're celebrating, they're partying together with people who they don't necessarily live with because now there's light in the sky at night. Now they can see what's going on around them when they're outside. The full moon is also associated with things like getting psychic downloads, feeling more in touch with your intuition. It's also associated with the feminine, with sexuality, with things that are uncontrollable. Now we hear, if you work in a labor and delivery unit or know somebody who does, you probably hear people talk about this a lot. Oh, it must be a full moon because we have more births happening. That's that release, that what was planted previously is now coming to fruition. As we go around the kind of opposite side of the clock from the full moon to the new moon, we say that the moon is waning. So she's losing light. And another way of looking at that is she's disseminating her light, all that light that she gathered, the action that was being taken, the knowledge that was being gathered, maybe it's now being disseminated, it's now being released. So, those are words that are associated with that last quarter moon. These are times where you might want to share your knowledge, share your abundance. If you've been working on a project that was started at the new moon, Now is the time to be talking about your findings from that project. What did we maybe learn in that? This is also a time to release the things that don't serve you anymore, the things that might need to be falling away, especially as they relate to that intention that you set. I like to look at the last quarter moon as a time to tie up or cut off loose ends. I think that's a really helpful way to look at this, that whatever intention was set, this is the time to go, all right, I've gathered, I've harvested what I took action on. And now, as I'm releasing, I'm also releasing the parts that I didn't get around to, right? 28, 29 days is actually not that long of a period of time. And there's going to be things that didn't happen. And so releasing those and saying, that's okay, that didn't happen. I'm going to cut off that loose end. Totally fine to do. You can always come back to that during the next or another moon cycle. Okay, so in addition to releasing, cutting off those loose ends, also tying up loose ends. If there's anything else that you still want to do and you say, yep, I've got time for that, I've got energy for that, get it done. Buckle down, get it done. That's definitely a very last quarter moon thing to do. And we're talking about these not in terms of this has to be done on this exact day, but what's the general energy of the week, right? You can look at where is the moon, what cycle or what phase is she at in her cycle? What is she headed towards? And blend those together to say, okay, we just had a full moon or we just had a last quarter moon. Now we're heading, as I'm recording this, we had a last quarter moon. We're heading to a new moon. What do I need to either tie up or cut off as I finish up whatever intentions I had set? That's the energy that we're talking about. And then finally, the dark moon. This, I think, is such an important part of knowing the phases of the moon because this is where rest really comes in. The dark moon is those 2 to 3 days leading up to the new moon. It's when there's the least amount of light in the sky. We've had that full moon. The moon has been disseminating her light. It's been waning. We've gone through the last quarter moon. Now is the time to rest. We're not going out to party at night. We're not getting together with our neighbors because there's no light in the sky and we're afraid to walk home in the dark. This is the time to rest, to reflect on those intentions that you had set the month prior, and to say, what did I do? What did I enjoy? What gave me life? What did I need to let go of? And then we go back into that process of intention setting. But without this dark moon phase, it's just go, intention, action, intention, action. The dark moon allows us to rest, and we all need that. We need that time of rest in our lives. We can get that throughout the week as well, not saying wait till the end of the month to rest, but making sure that there is that intentional time for rest when you are working with the phases of the moon is really important. And then the cycle begins again, and we get to go back to the new moon. This and the thing that I love about this is, like I said, it gives us that rhythm. We are setting intentions and planting seeds. We're letting them grow. We're making sure, right? If you plant seeds, you have to go out and water them. You have to weed out things that might keep your seeds from growing. It's the same thing as we're setting intentions for our lives, that we have to be able to plant and then care for our seeds. And then when we get to that full moon, harvesting from our work and giving ourselves that opportunity to be grateful for what we've done, grateful for what we've experienced over the past couple of weeks is an important part of that as well. And then disseminating, sharing our findings, sharing the fruit of our labor with those around us, and then giving ourselves time to rest. That's the cycle of the moon that we're talking about. There's so many other nuances to this. We're not going to get into those super deep today. I'll give you a little bit of that. But as I mentioned, we're coming into a new moon in Cancer. So in that case, we look at, okay, what are the themes of Cancer? Cancer is a water sign, so it has a lot to do with our intuition and our emotions. Cancer is associated with family, with nurturing, with inwards. That's that. Think about the new moon and the dark moon. We go inwards, we go into our home, and we have some solitude. That can be very Cancer energy. So, looking at that in terms of what do I need with my internal life? What intentions can I set there is really helpful. The next new moon will be in Leo. That's going to be a completely different energy. Leo's energy is shining your light outward. Leo's energy is saying, this is who I am. Let me present myself to the world. Where Cancer is associated with the moon, Leo's associated with the sun. Very different energies. So knowing what sign the new moon is happening in is really helpful. And then knowing where that sign is in your unique birth chart. So every birth chart has all 12 signs, and each sign is going to be in a house. And those houses have to do with different phases of our lives. So let's say you have Cancer in the fifth house, then this specific new moon is not only going to be dealing with themes of family and nurture and your inner life and your intuition and your emotional well being, it's also going to have to do with fifth house energies, which are things like fun, recreation, sex, children, enjoyment. So blending those two together to go, okay, what intentions can I set? How can I be intentional about working with this energy of Cancer, nurturing oriented, internal energy, and adding in the elements of fun and recreation and enjoyment and pleasure, all of that to it. Maybe your Cancer for you is in a different house. Maybe it's in, let's say it's the 10th house. The 10th house is associated with our public life, with our careers. And so there's intentions that you want to set about your career. This is a good time to do that. So getting to know your own chart in that way is really helpful too. If this is completely new to you, if you have no idea what your birth chart looks like or what sign means what, I have a really cool guide available that you can download. So if you just go to mosttrueyou.com/guide, and I'll put a link in the show notes to this, it's free. It walks you through how to find your birth chart, how to find your sun, moon, and rising signs. And then also in that, you'll see where your houses are at. So you can read about each of the signs. You can read about what your sun, moon, and rising mean. And then you can begin to apply this to your own life. If this is something that you would like to go deeper into, email me. As I'm rebooting the podcast, I'm looking at, what do you all want to hear? What is going to be most helpful for you? So if this is something where you're like, let's go deeper into this, email me. I'd love to hear from you. It's hello@mosttrueyou.com, and those go directly to me. There's a lot more that we can say about the lunar phases, but this gives you a really good idea of kind of the foundational elements of working with the moon. Okay, my friends, enjoy this next moon cycle. Enjoy this new moon phase. If you're listening on the day this comes out, it's a dark moon day. It's a day for rest. It's a day for reflection. It's a day for getting ready to set those intentions. See you next Monday.